Invited here to talk about metrics that matter to achieve growth. So who here works in a startup, wants to work in a startup, has founded a startup? Raise your hand. Okay, so the rest of you I'd ask to leave. So let's get to it. Here are the metrics that matter to achieve growth. They don't. It's actually a stupid thing to ask. Now I realize I just insulted the people that invited me here, but it's for a good cause. Metrics have nothing to do with growth. Metrics are something you look at once you've actually achieved growth. The only thing that matters is product market fit, and this is the reason. A lot of people know this, but I'm here to talk about this part of it, which is that 9 out of 10 startups actually fail. So that means that if all of you here, I'm going to guess there's, what, 60 people, worked on a startup, so 5-6 years, 60 hours a week, 9 out of 10 of you go home with nothing. Thank you for playing, go away, and one person gets millions of dollars. So product market fit is the single most important thing because it is the only thing that is going to make the difference. It is the only thing that creates the 1 out of 10 outcome. And so what is product market fit? Why is it so important? A lot of it is because of this guy. Does somebody know who this is? Nobody's ever gotten this right. Good job. He's hard to recognize. Most people know his book. So Steve Blank is an entrepreneur that wrote a book 15, maybe 20 years ago now, called The 4 Steps to the Epiphany. And he looked at why so many startups that he was on the board of in the Valley were failing. And he's the first guy to figure this out. And it started the whole lean startup movement, which was all the rage about 10 years ago and now has fizzled out. But one of the things he does in this book, which has stuck with me, is he looks at how big companies fail. So companies that have established resources, all the money in the world, distribution that can hire the smartest people in the world, if those guys screw up, there's something special happening that doesn't happen in the real world. So his examples out of the book I like to reuse because they're pretty funny. So there's some millennials in the room. This is a CD. So you can ask your parents about this. There was a time where music wasn't free and we would burn the information on these plastic discs and then wrap that in more plastic and people would go buy this. So at that time, a company called Kodak, which invented film, you can ask your parents about that too, said, hey, we should figure out a way to not print up all this paper and put pictures on CDs and people will watch them on their television sets. So they built the thing that looks like a DVD player. You could play this and it was called the photo CD. Now, believe it or not, this was too much innovation for your parents. They were like, whoa, like pictures on a TV. And it actually failed, and Kodak put in $150 million of marketing around this. It was basically just too early for the market. That's one example. This is my other favorite example. I put the iPhone next to it for the millennials. Before, there was something called a Newton. It was like a really large, shitty iPhone that didn't do anything, that didn't have the internet. This is actually Steve Jobs' only failure. The Newton was their personal assistant. Apple burned through $100 million marketing this thing because they didn't realize that they were too early for the market. Same thing as Kodak. And this is my favorite one of all time. Again, millennials, a phone used to look like this. I know this is hard to imagine. It had buttons and all you could do is take calls. This is Motorola. They figured that it would be really cool if cell phones worked everywhere, so they got rid of the cell phone tower and they built the Iridium satellite network. They tried to market this as, hey, you can take a call from Machu Picchu. They spent $5 billion, and then they pulled the plug on it. Satellites are really expensive. These things are still up there, and the military uses them and a couple of rich people. So at the end of the day, the question remains, if all of these companies that can hire anybody and spend any amount of money on something to innovate, why are they failing? And it's a very interesting question. It also brings to the point, well, what hope does a startup have? And the answer lies in what has become the lean startup movement. These are the books. They're the usual suspects. Maybe you've read some of these. They kind of define what the lean movement is. And if you haven't, I can help you. Just Google them. But the fundamental thing behind this movement was, oh, you have to hit product market fit. And one of the things I realized over the years, watching other entrepreneurs fail and looking at our own journey, is everybody says, yeah, let's go do that. Let's hit product market fit, but they don't understand what that is. And it's actually a very strange phenomenon that you're not going to encounter more than a couple times in your life. And the reason this is important is because if you ask the question, how do I know if we found it, it's I've seen so many startups think that they had it, and then they didn't. and that's why they ended up dying. They were pushing on something that didn't have fit, but everybody, the investors, the founders, were so convinced that they had it, they just wouldn't give up on it. So I found that the most useful thing I can do for people that are starting up their companies for the first time is define what product market fit is. And for that, I'm going to use Hopper as an example. There are two fundamental qualities that I've found over the years. What we've achieved, what other companies, so I used to work for Expedia, those guys went and did Zillow, it's a $7 billion company. They burned through 82 million before they had anything that worked. They're now doing Glassdoor, which is about to IPO. I have a bunch of friends that are more successful than me. When you look at that, these two qualities that we have are everywhere, that every major successful startup has one of these two things at the point. The first thing is what I call precipitous, and there's a lot of definitions to this word. It means sudden and abrupt, like falling off a cliff, right? And so a lot of people don't realize how brutal product market fit is when it kicks in. And it's hard to because it almost never happens, and here's my example. This is 44 weeks of our user sessions back when we were on the web. And what you're seeing there is the first 42 number of unique users, whatever this is. I killed off the Y scale for obvious confidentiality reasons, and I'm hiding in this chart the last 2 weeks after that orange line. And you can kind of see we got our first PR hit in the US, like, woo, spike. SEO starts to kick in, and you're looking at this going, okay, our startup's working, right? We'd worked 6 years before we shipped this, and people were throwing rocks at me at the end. So like, we really wanted this to work, and we were doing all the growth hacking and everything. So you look at this and you're like, yeah, okay, so we have traction, right? Product market fit, it's all gonna be okay. Right? This is what happened in the 2 weeks at the end of that period. That is product market fit. Now, the interesting and completely wild thing here, what did that was not on our homepage. It wasn't what we were building. It was some derived product that we had in the back end of our site, and all it was a website that vomited out a page that looked like it was from 1997. You said, I want to go from Montreal to Paris, and it told you if you buy your ticket in a month, you have a good chance of saving some money. 1 million people came back to the website. It wasn't on the homepage. We were on Good Morning America, the Today Show, the New York Times, third most emailed article for the month. This is the freaking New York Times, this one thing. And what we realized is, although people were selling airline tickets for 20 years, I used to work at the company that sold the most, nobody had addressed the incredible, insane anxiety around that purchase that the airlines somehow are going to screw you. Everybody feels it, everybody feels bad about this, and when we just told them, you might do a little bit better if you look, in a month, 1 million people came to the website. That's it, product market fit. Product market fit is almost always a single feature, not an ecosystem, a platform, a marketplace. The second thing, and this is also something that a ton of people confuse, product market fit is robust. So I hear a bunch of guys, hey, give me some advice about my startup, and I always ask them, do you have fit? Do you have fit? And they say, oh yeah, we got 1 million people on SEO like a month, and blah, blah, blah. They don't tell you the bounce rate is 99%, but we're growing, right? Or we grew 40% year over year because we figured out how to buy AdWords, $10 cheaper than the competitors or something like that. That is not product market fit, and this is the most common mistake, confusing growth with fit. Right? You can juice growth up, you can hack growth up, it's not fit. And my best example for robustness is this. Product market fit should live above your execution. You should actually be pretty incompetent at that stage, and it should still work. And here's my example. So this is the same kind of thing. I punched it to quarterly. The red line is the same chart I was showing you, but now we take into account the scale of the growth that we've had. And what we did about 2 months after getting 1 million users, after 7 years of working, I did the only logical thing. I shut down our website. I went to our investors and I said, it's finally working. I'm shutting down the website and we're going on mobile. And so there's a whole story of why I did that. But what we ended up doing, if you think of it, is we eviscerated all of our execution. All of our UX went away. Our platform went away. Our SEO went away. I just killed everything that we'd worked on to get to this, except we kept the fundamental fit of people are anxious about when they buy the ticket. So after that pivot, and by the way, we didn't have a single iOS developer when we made that decision. We didn't know how to code iOS. 2 years later, we grew 18x from that pot that you saw, and that's what that blue line is. right? So fit truly outlasts any execution that you might have. And most companies that hit fit are pretty bad at executing because you're so busy catching up with your growth that you don't have time to do things properly. So those are the two fundamental things. It eliminates 90% of the cases that people think they have fit as being a false positive, and I know how depressive that sounds, but when you get it, that's how you build a real company. So let's talk about the execution a little bit. What is fit? Like, what are you trying to build in the product? You're staring at a blank sketch on your page, and you're trying to say, what am I going to design this app to be? So what are you looking for? And it comes down to this. This is a Rich Barton quote. So Rich Barton is the founder of Expedia and the guy who went to do Zillow. He calls it the wow factor. And this is the most sophisticated concept you have ever seen. Somebody looks at your product and says, wow, that's cool. Right? And why does that matter? It's because at that particular time, two things happen. They understood what you were trying to do. If you've tried to build product before, that is not a given. And two, they understood the value it could bring to them, and they realized that that was unique, and therefore, what are they going to do? They're going to tell somebody else about it. And they might actually use it. Right? Wow factor is the foundation on which everything is built. Growth, retention, everything comes from that, yet most startup founders spend no time worrying about that. And even today, after 100 million raised, this is all we care about. It's all we care about when we're talking about a product improvement or launching something new. So if you look at Hopper, again, this example, there are a lot of interesting things about the app, right? We have a calendar with pretty colors. We have a running bunny that pops up from time to time to entertain you. We also have an engine that's built on 8 trillion data points that successfully predicts the price of all airfare around the world a year in advance within $5 to the day. That cost $12 million to build. The bunny cost about $2,000 to animate. None of this has anything to do with WoW. Neither the technology or the UX, and we've won awards and everything you could imagine. None of that's the wow factor. This is the wow factor. I have to point at the guy in the back. So the wow factor is this. When we deliver a push notification on your phone for something you asked for, and all of a sudden you've saved a whole bunch of money. That's it. And we have a regression on 25 million trips that proves that if we do this to you, you're going to be loyal. You will abandon whatever website you've been using for 20 years and use us forever. And why it's not the savings. It's because at that moment you realize, oh my God, I'm never, ever, ever going to have to plan my own airfare again. I don't have to do this myself. I don't have to shop 13 websites until midnight to think I'm fine. I just tell Hopper whatever I want, I put the phone in my pocket, and I know they're going to deliver the goods. That's it. There's nothing else to it. People don't want to shop for airfare. And we're the only platform where you don't have to do anything. That's the whole wow, right? So this is what it looks like in your user base. And I've seen startups that have raised more money than us that don't even have this, and this is the only thing we care about. And you'll notice it's all about emotional connection. So layer number one of wow. People actually on social media write that your app did what it was supposed to do and are happy. I've seen so many startups that don't even have a single thing like that, and they think they're doing good because they got a CEO going or they raised some money. People have to tell you that it actually worked. And I know a ton of CEOs that don't even care about that. So that's level one. Level two, when you get the emotional Anne Hathaway gif that describes how they felt using your product, right? Then you know you got something going, right? People are saying, wow, this is cool. Layer three, if you are the only competitor in your market that can charge for their service, this is our case, we charge a $5 fee for booking. Every place else you book, there's no fee. Expedia, United.com, AA, whatever, Canada, there are no fees for the booking. They screw you later, but there's nothing up front, and we're the only company that can charge for that. And the reason I put that there is not to make money, is I wanted to make sure that I put as many barriers as possible to our conversion, to be sure that people really wanted the app. So I put a fee there not to make the money, to make sure that we were outpriced, that if you were using Hopper and paying us, it made no logical sense. It's because you love the product so much, you were willing to use your phone to make this transaction. So if you can charge a fee where nobody else does, but people write to you on social media to say you deserve it, that means you've done something real for this person. We once had a lady email us. She said that she had to book on United.com because our app was down, and she was inquiring whether she could PayPal us the $5 because she felt guilty. That's how you know that you have wow. The other one, which is really major, is when you change behavior. First time you got in an Uber and you're like, wow, taxi cab, never again, right? This is a case, we have a bunch of people saying, hey, I fly more now. Why? Because I hated planning it. Now I don't have to do the work. I had the money all the time. It just sucked to do it. The other one is when people insult their relatives on social media for doing it wrong by not using your app. Also a good sign. And this is my favorite one of all time, when people's cognitive skills degrade when they use their app. So this is a case where we sent two people a deal, and they were so emotionally excited about this, they failed at texting each other. And then the person actually snapped that and tweeted and said, this is my experience using Hopper. We became drooling idiots. So we were saving these people a lot of money, and they were like, a boatification, what do you mean? This is crazy. And this went on. This thread is super long, and the person tweeted about this. So notice these are deeply rooted emotional reactions to something that you would think nobody cares about. And every single startup that's gotten big found this in the beginning. Everything else you've heard about metrics and conversion and the right board and using this technology, that, who the investors are, it's all crap and it doesn't matter. Even coming to a startup festival and listening to me is a waste of time. The only thing you should be doing is searching for wow factor. Let's talk about how you do it. So I was thinking about how to make this a little bit more tangible if you're actually trying to do this. So I thought, well, what if I went back in time 10 years ago? What would I say to myself in terms of, what are the biggest mistakes that I made, or what did the other people that I've met kind of figured out before me? And it comes down to these three things. So this is a quote from Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, and I've repurposed it for this. Because I thought it was a perfect embodiment of what it is. He actually said, when we started, meaning one of his previous startups, the only people that worked for us were animals. I was like, wow, that's a perfect explanation. And anybody who hasn't hired for a startup is like, what is this guy talking about? But what it comes down to is this. This is a normal distribution curve. Right? So this is what happens in school and grades and how good people are on average at ping pong. Most people are right in the middle, and some people suck and some people are good. And this is a very simple math concept. When you start hiring, you realize this very quickly. About 50% of this curve are not good at what they do. They applied for a job and they're not good. So any manager that starts at Hopper gets this speech from me, and they all at some point say, Fred, are you saying that half of the world's population is actually incompetent at what they do? And I'm like, wait until you start looping people for interviews, right? You will see. And they come back a day later like, Fred, you're right, it's more than half. Everybody's an idiot. But this is basically true. This is the other half. Good people, they actually didn't lie about what school they went to. They actually know how to code. They can do the job properly. They've been previously employed. They don't have necessarily criminal records. And these are all the people that people try to hire everywhere. And this percentage, which is actually, it's plotted as 10%, but it's more like 2 or 3. These are the animals, right? And you've met people like this. These are people that are so insane about what they do that their behavior is almost psychotic, right? This is the salesperson. When you overhear them trying to get to somebody to pitch them, you feel sorry for the poor bastard on the other end. You're like, you should just buy the thing now to get her off your back. She's never going to let you go. This is the PR person that cold calls New York Times reporters on their freaking cell phones to pitch them your startup and gets hung up on and calls back. This is the graphic designer that feels physical pain when something is off by a pixel. And he's like, dude, what the hell, right? This is the engineer that stays up until 4 a.m. because there's a bug. It doesn't matter. It actually isn't crashing anything, but he knows there's a bug in there somewhere, and he just can't sleep, and he's going to get it done. The thing about a startup is this. Remember that 9 out of 10? This is the distribution curve that it yields, right? Nothing on Earth works like this. This is like that stuff about the satellites, right? Everybody on that side of the line gets absolutely nothing. Everybody on this side gets millions of dollars. And the only people that are going to make a difference in that environment are animals. So do not bother hiring anybody else. It's a waste of money and time. And the other part that Paul Graham insists on, which is very true, if you're not an animal yourself, you're going to have a hard time doing this. Right? And that's the introspection that you need to have. So the reason that you only hire animals is the problem is so hard that that's the only thing that's going to matter. And I was trying to figure out the best way to illustrate this, and I came up with this. So on this side, you have the ratio of US college football players that make it to the NFL, 1 out of 59. So hockey's a little bit harder. It's 1 out of 77. I think more people play hockey in Canada. And the US Navy SEALs admit 1 out of 67 people that apply for the program. You can become a SEAL. That is our ratio of hiring. So here are our numbers. In the last 2 years, 17,000 people have applied to work at Hopper. We did 2,500 interviews, and we put out 85 offers. 83 of them were accepted or something like that. Only animals. Now, how do you do this is a whole other speech. We don't have HR, we don't have recruiters, managers do this. And this is the only reason we've had the curve that I was showing you originally. Our forecasting engine that built the whole company, 1 guy, 1 weekend. The code hasn't changed. It's been tweaked, it's 1 guy, 1 weekend. He's an animal. Second thing of 3, ignore reality. So this is the most common mistake when people explain to me their idea or what they've been working on and everything. They're describing how their thing fits in the current state of reality, meaning their pitch of the problem in the market actually makes logical sense. I'm dude, that's not going to work, right? And so the famous sentence behind that, the underpinning thing, and this is actually when Hopper started working, is when I realized this, is this sentence, which is up there, skate where the puck is going. So it's attributed to Steve Jobs, right? A lot. Does somebody know where this came from? Yeah, this one's, yeah, it's him, right? Exactly. So first of all, I hate that one of the most influential things I've encountered in my life is something that a hockey player said. But secondly, he meant it literally, right? And so somebody went to him and say, well, in an interview, well, why are you so much better than everybody else? And it's a hard question, right? Like, and he says, well, I just skate to where the puck's going. Everybody else is going to where it is. I'm just over here, and then I'm good at picking that, and so I put it in the net. And then a whole bunch of crummy consultants and MBAs repurposed this, so it's one of the most misused sentences in all of business, but fundamentally underpinning that, it's very, very hard to do. It's why Steve Jobs actually grappled onto it. I'll give you our example of this. You'll see why this isn't stupid and tricky. This is the mobile penetration when we decided to shut down our website. Basically, 88% of all travel commerce in the US, where was our main market, was sold on a desktop or a laptop, and mobile was 12%. And for a whole bunch of reasons, I was like, that's wrong, we have to be mobile. So I went to my board, and I went to all my friends, one of them sitting right there. I went to the founders of Expedia, and I said, hey, should I shut down my website now that it's finally working after 7 years and just do everything on the phone? That's 12% of the market. And they said, Fred, are you out of your mind? Like, what's your problem? Like, this is finally working. Why would you ever like do that? Do both, right? Everybody's doing both. What's your problem? So I didn't listen to them, and as you can tell, I have a high tolerance to risk, so we shut down the website and we went all mobile. This was the number that I was basing it on. Now, if you look at that bar, this is the trend. So although the number was 12%, where that little dotted line is up there, you can see what was happening. Mobile was growing 100% year over year in a category that was growing compound 6 to 10. So it wasn't really hard to figure out that this was going to happen, right? That this literally, it was actually going to become the majority of things. So when I made the decision, it made no sense, but if I show you this chart, yeah, of course, it's totally logical. Today, mobile and travel is past 50% of all transactions, and in some markets, like China, it's 90%. Latin America, it's 80%. Right? So of course we picked the wrong thing, but here's the thing. If the puck is over there, the cameras are over there, all the guys are over there, and you're skating that way, you look like an idiot when you're doing. It's like, what is he, like, why is this guy going over here? And then when you get there, 2 things happen. One, you're not out of the breath because you weren't like elbowing your fight with all the other guys there. You're just sitting there, you're waiting, and then you're the only one with the puck. Now, being the only one with the puck is the only way you win when you hit the growth phase. I'll give you the reason why this ended up mattering. It's the reason I did it. I hadn't thought it through that well, but I knew this was the only way it was going to work. So we compete in an existing market. There are 2 companies. One is Expedia, one is Priceline. They own everything you've ever heard of. Priceline, Kayak, name them all. They all roll up to one of those companies. Expedia has 25 billion of market cap. Priceline has 96 billion, right? So together they're about 100 and something billion. Those 2 companies last year in marketing and user acquisition spent $9.6 billion. $5 billion went to Google. They outspend us our entire annual budget every 6 hours. We have more mobile users and downloads than any of their brands. because it's the only thing we do, and it turned out that the ecosystem user acquisition, all their network effects that they've developed over the last 20 years, they don't carry over to the app ecosystem. We don't have a single serious competitor yet. And the only reason is we went to the corner where there's nothing going on because it was only 12%. If you make an important strategic decision and you are able to explain it and it makes sense and your investors agree, you're probably doing the wrong thing. And this is the third one. The worst thing you can do is try to grow your startup. This is the least intuitive one of all the set. I mean, you can read how crazy that is. And I made this mistake for 5 years. And here's what happens. Like, you raise some money, you've said, we're going to do this, and you're working really hard and all that crap. And then you go, we have to grow. So you start doing stuff. And somebody says, have you read about growth hacking? And you go do some of that. And then you're like, we need to create content for social media. And what about SEO? And you're doing all of this stuff to grow, right? And fundamentally, you don't know if you have product market fit, but you're like, we have to grow. That's how we're going to get our Series B or whatever the hell you think you're supposed to do. And so you're hacking it. And if you're good and you're passionate, you've hired animals, you're actually going to move the needle somewhat to some point. And this is what kills most startups at the A round. They didn't have fit. They pushed like crazy to grow because they had crafty animals doing all sorts of stuff. It kind of started going, and then it kind of didn't work, flattened out, metrics didn't come in. You know, you can hear all these stories, we didn't meet the growth that we were expecting. And that's because you didn't have fit, right? And this is the best explanation. We spent 2 years growth hacking what we had before this line. That was completely wasted time. We could have gone surfing for 2 years, waited for the New York Times reporter to find the thing we'd buried on our website, and showed up the day of, and we would have exactly the same outcome. Nothing would have mattered. Once the tech platform had been built for this thing, the 2 years of me trying to grow this startup didn't work. So obviously it's wasteful to do this, and you don't have a lot of resources and time, but that's not why it's dangerous, is that you're going to convince yourself and everybody around you that your startup is doing okay. And you're going to raise more money, and then at some point, the animal factor kicks out, because you can't create this with just like elbow grease, and then you flatten out, you run out of money, and you die. Right? So this is the most important thing. What product market fit does is you're like pushing this massive boulder that you feel you could never move, and it's moving an inch uphill, and all of a sudden you give one last push and it starts rolling downhill, which is what this is. And you're like, oh my God, the site just went down. It's just completely overwhelming. And so what is hard is this search for that event, because it means you're going to have to kill your darlings, give up your ideas, and admit to everybody, including your mom and your investors, that you got it wrong and try something else. It's much easier to keep hacking away at the thing that's growing 10% every month, right? And this is what kills most startups. True product market fit destroys everything. So any attempt to grow it, you're actually screwing up the experiment. And the better team you have doing that, the more you're going to screw up your own experiment. So do not try to grow your startup. Once your startup does this on you and the whole floor gets pulled under you, that's the time to get into growth mode, not before. And it's the hardest thing in the world to do. So this is my last bit of advice. Until you find it, keep searching. Right? If 9 out of 10 startups fail, it means that 9 out of 10 ideas were bad. But a lot of founders have more than one idea. Right? Founder of LinkedIn had this other thing before. Twitter was a pivot. YouTube was a dating site. Right? So a whole bunch of stuff like that gets pivoted. Look at how you can change the idea to hit the next thing until you get real fit. As depressing as it is, you might have to do it 10 times. It took us 7 years. Keep searching, and when you find it, you're going to get your own cliff like this. And that's when it gets interesting. We have 49 seconds for questioning. Actually, we're over. I'll take one question if there's one. Whoever, yep.
Why did you decide to shut down your mobile version of the website? Why not keep the mobile and the app?
Yeah, so it was two things. I had pushed my team for about a month to work on mobile. And then I brought everybody in, and I said, write on that board how much time you spent on mobile versus the web, including myself, and everybody was 0 on mobile, 100% on the web. So I realized we couldn't do it, and we had 20 people. The focus thing. Could have powered through that. But then we realized when we started getting that kind of traction, my plan was to go to airlines and say, okay, I've sent you 50,000 free referrals. because we weren't actually transacting at that time, like Kayak, I'll send you a user, then you pay me. So as soon as we got big, the airline started suing us, and they said, you're not allowed to send us unauthorized customers, and you're misusing our brand. So I'm like, oh, this is great. Like, we're totally screwed after 7 years. My revenue model is a lawsuit, right? And so then we started going to them, and we're like, well, they said, oh, we're big, and we have all the traffic, and every booking you get takes it away from A.com, so I don't even want you to exist. That was literally what they told us. So I'm like, okay, like, what about the phone? And they're like, well, we don't care about the phone. I'm like, okay, done, deal. It was literally a survival technique. There was more there. I'd been on the board in India for 7 years on the equivalent of Expedia, a company called Make My Trip, and their mobile numbers had been 10, 11%, 12%. And then the cheap Android phones hit, and in 1 quarter, mobile bookings in India jumped from 10 to 45% in 1 quarter. I'm like, wait. So I started reading up about India, China, Latin America, and I'm like, wait, most human beings don't own a laptop. It was literally that. And that's when I found that Wayne Gretzky thing, like lying in some dentist's, lobby or something. Like, oh my God! I was like, that's how you do it. That's it. All right, guys, thanks.